Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to another forecast discussion. Back with another video today. We've got another interesting setup on tap for today. We have an enhanced risk out for parts of southeast Iowa into basically central Illinois here. All severe hazards on the table today, especially the threat for tornadoes, including some that could be strong here. We have a small 10% hashed area there from southeast Iowa into northwest Illinois, just to the west of the Peoria, Illinois area. Also, a damaging wind and large, perhaps significant hail threat. We've got a 30 hatched hail threat there from including the Des Moines area, out to the east and southeast there into central Illinois. So, interesting setup, perhaps a more potent setup than yesterday on tap for today. So, let's go ahead and get started here. Take a look at our water vapor satellite imagery as we do always. A few things we can note here. Number one, we have our big kind of Alaskan trough that is digging down off the west coast. Not going to be a factor for today's setup. You can see a big ridge of high pressure here over basically the southern half of the United States here. Big old ridge here. And you can see this little shortwave that is riding over the top of the ridge. That's going to be our main player for today's event. It's going to move kind of east-southeast today as the afternoon progresses. And this is going to be just enough of an impetus for increasing lift and getting storms to fire here in our target area this afternoon. So let's go and look at our visible satellite imagery here. You can see we have basically quite a bit of sun here across the target area, across much of Iowa into Missouri and Illinois. Fairly clear in this region. We have a few little bands of showers and storms here across the region. You can see some storms that fired here across basically east central to southeast Missouri, as well as a little band of showers here basically at the Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri kind of triple point region there. These should dissipate pretty efficiently as the morning progresses. Shouldn't have any issues with getting quite a bit of destabilization here, given a nice amount of surface heating that should take place across this region throughout the morning and afternoon hours. So we'll take a look at our broad scale picture here. This is 500 millibars, so about 18,000 feet aloft. You can see our big old trough here across the, just off the west coast there. You can see a little bit of enhanced flow here riding the top of that high, and you can see a little bit of a kink here across the Dakotas. This is our little shortwave trough here that is going to be our player for today's severe weather threat. Again, ridge of high pressure here, centered across the southern portion of the United States there, centered basically over North Texas, give or take a little bit. And the shortwave is just going to kind of ride the top of that ridge and be our player for today. You can see it a little bit better here at 300 millibars if we go up a little bit more well-defined kind of trough feature here across the Dakotas into Nebraska. Belt of enhanced flow here impinging into this region, and will continue to impinge into the target area this afternoon and evening. We go down to 700 millibars, and we can pick out a bunch of different little shortwaves here. This is a very shortwave rich map, if you will. So we can see our big old trough here across the west coast. Again, not going to be a factor today. And so we can pick out a bunch of different shortwaves here. This is one right in here across Montana into Wyoming, and this looks to be the best timed for our setup today. You can argue it goes a little bit farther down here. A little bit of shortwave maybe in here as well across the kind of Nebraska, South Dakota border region. This may be inducing these kind of showers and storms out ahead of it here along that kind of Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri triple point area this morning. That should move off again. Very weak shortwave here should move off to the east and give us no issues later on this afternoon. We've got one located here across Minnesota that will move on out. So it's going to be this wave, I think, back here that is going to be our main little shortwave engine for today's severe weather threat. Going to have to keep an eye on that. But again, this is a very shortwave rich map. These little kinks in the flow are going to be just enough to help get us a little bit of enhancement of the lift and kind of spin in the atmosphere out ahead of them this afternoon, particularly this one near Montana, the Montana-Wyoming border here. We'll go down to 850 millibars and take a look at our low-level jet. We have, again, kind of a typical sort of nocturnal low-level jet that's kind of wearing off right now across Kansas into northern Oklahoma. And as we talked about yesterday, we're not really getting that big old trough to traverse the Rockies. A little bit of ridging across the Rockies here. We do have some zonal flow here across the Rockies. located kind of right in here, but really don't really have that concentrated flow that's going to help us get strong surface cyclogenesis to the lee or on the east side of the Rockies. That's going to help us really get a mass response out ahead and increase that low-level jet and keep it steady throughout the day. We're going to kind of lose this little kind of lobe of low-level jet here as we go throughout the day. I'll give you a little sneak peek here going ahead a few hours. You can see we kind of lose that going ahead. And one thing also to note is that the low-level jet is quite veered. And of course, we know out here we have quite a bit of dry air from the desert southwest that may start to filter in here and get kind of advected into the region here this afternoon. We'll have to keep an eye on that. We should have enough warm advection, enough moisture here across the plains at this kind of low altitude that that may not make a difference, given that the target area is kind of in here. If this was Oklahoma or Kansas and we had a low-level jet this veered out of the southwest, I would expect that there would be some dry air filtering in aloft that might temper things. But because this is a little bit farther east, that may not be a big issue for today. Surface pattern is a little wonky, but you can see a little bit a nice surface low, kind of broad surface low, kind of concentrated here across the Kansas-Nebraska border right in there. This is going to move a little bit off to the east throughout the day and maintain that kind of backed flow out ahead of it, backed or southeasterly flow out ahead of that, continue warm advection out ahead of that. So surface moisture, near surface moisture should be pretty good today. We'll take a look at the data, the barbs in a second. But again, this surface low will move off to the east today, kind of maintain that kind of warm frontal zone here across Iowa. We have a little bit of a surface low up here, kind of in the Minnesota Arrowhead region. You can see a little bit of spin up here with potentially a cold front back out in here. And so a little bit of an interesting kind of setup. This is maybe where we have kind of a stationary front, quasi-stationary front out here across the kind of northern Kansas into southeast Nebraska, southwest Iowa. It turns into a cold front with northern extent here, leading up to that northernmost low across far northeast Minnesota there. So let's take a look at our surface data here, our surface plots here. So this is a very intricate setup at the surface for today. We're going to have to take a look deeply here to figure out all the different features at play. So we have our surface low, kind of concentrated right in here, basically the Kansas-Nebraska border region, right in here to the southwest of the Lincoln-Omaha area, northwest of Salina there, give or take a little bit. We have our low up here in Minnesota. That's going to be kind of off screen right in here. And it looks like we have some sort of cold front in play here. You can see winds out of the northeast here, southeasterly winds out ahead of this low in the warm sector here. So it looks like we have some sort of a cold front. It's going to be a little bit tricky to draw here, but roughly probably going to be somewhere, roughly sort of somewhere in here. Of course, we're not kind of worried about this area for today, so I'll just kind of draw it roughly in there here. Again, this portion may be a little bit stationary. You can see 10 knots of northeasterly wind to the north side of this cold front, 10 knots of kind of easterly to southeasterly wind here, so not much movement of this portion of the front today, but this northern portion may continue to move as these northerlies kind of push it down to the south a little bit today without that real strong surface flow out ahead of a real strong surface low here. This portion may continue to move out to the east a little bit and play a role a little bit in initiation for storms today. So another thing we can take note of here, I'll go back to the red pen, is we have what appears to be a little bit of an outflow boundary somewhere across northeast Kansas into northern Missouri. If you look here, we have strong southerly flow here, 82 over 71 here at Topeka, and the wind's back a little bit to southeasterly here in far southeast Nebraska, northwest Missouri here. So it looks like there is a little bit of an outflow boundary settled somewhere in this region right in here. It's a little bit hard to tell as you go out with eastern extent, but I do believe there is some sort of boundary that may extend a little bit out here farther into Illinois. It's kind of diffuse though, but you can definitely see this portion. This is expected to lift northward throughout the day as well as we get this continued kind of southerly flow here out ahead of the low. this outflow boundary will continue to move north and kind of merge with this frontal zone here across Iowa. So we're looking at an area out ahead of this cold front and near this retreating outflow boundary. That's going to be our most favored corridor for supercell and maybe tornado development later on this afternoon. So we're going to have to watch. This boundary should become more diffuse as we get lots of surface heating, as we mentioned, later this afternoon. So that is going to be a good thing. You don't really like these real strong, tight gradient outflow boundaries because you get kind of a lot of storms to fire along them. But this may get a little bit more diffuse throughout the afternoon and help, kind of not just vomit storms all over the place. Although we will have this cold front to deal with and maybe some other factors as far as mode goes. So we'll talk about those in a little bit here. But a very intricate surface pattern for today. Let's move on to some upper air soundings here. We'll start at Topeka. So you can see the numbers, the instability numbers not really registering here, but we can kind of figure out the instability ourselves here. 69 over 63 at the surface. Decent moisture here in the low levels. Not, kind of that tight, kind of, that green kind of tight to the red line there. Below kind of a layer of drier air aloft. Not super classic sort of a look here, but definitely a look that would be favorable for severe weather. 69 over 63 definitely favorable for severe weather. We have some steep lapse rates aloft, so maybe some semblance of an elevated mixed layer here that's advected out across the plains here. Some drier air above about 500 millibars here. We have a little bit of an inversion aloft. That should go away once once the shortwave moves in here this afternoon. Do have a little bit of elevated instability this morning. If we draw our kind of surface-based instability, we do have a little bit of surface-based CAPE here this morning, and that should only increase as the day progresses, given the strong surface heating that is prog to take place. Holograph shows a significant amount of low-level warm advection. You can see the 0 to 1 SRH here approaching 1,000 meters square per second square. That is ridiculous, and that means we have a ton of warm advection ongoing. Again, when you have winds that veer like this with height, in that layer where they're veering or moving clockwise with height, you have strong warm air advection, and that is key to keeping that moisture at the surface, continuing to pump that moisture into the target area and assisting in building that instability as the day progresses. So very strong low-level curvature here in the Holograph. 900 0 to 1 SRH is crazy here. That will decrease as the day goes on. That, if we had that, we'd be usually thinking apocalypse as far as tornadoes are concerned. But this should decrease somewhat as the day goes on. And but right now, strong warm advection, that is a good thing for sure here at Topeka. Let's move up to Omaha here. Kind of the same, not as much of a semblance of that curvature in the low-level Holograph. Still some semblance of warm advection here in the low levels, some veering with height. We do have an inversion here at the surface. Once again, that should erode pretty quickly this afternoon as surface heating takes over. Decent amount of mixed layer CAPE here, 1,200 joules per kilogram of CAPE already. So that makes me think we should start to approach somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 4,000 plus here this afternoon if we already have this in place with strong surface heating expected later on this afternoon. Steep lapse rates aloft once again that degree of strong instability should maintain a pretty good hail threat for storms today if they remain discrete. During the time they remain discrete, they should produce large hail given the steep lapse rates and strong instability that's forecast here. So a little bit of drier air, this definitely looks like an elevated mixed layer to me, with a little bit of dry air aloft as well. Let's go out to the east here. We'll go to Davenport, Iowa. Interesting here, very stout inversion here at the surface. Some drier air in the low levels here working in. Again, I think given the strong warm advection here we saw at Topeka, probably into Missouri, that should start to moisten a little bit through this afternoon. Shouldn't really maintain itself like this through the afternoon, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. Once again, steep-ish lapse rates aloft here. We're a little bit farther east, but the lapse rates should steepen and instability should build in throughout the day, especially with western extent there across southern and central Iowa. And one thing, we talked about how the kind of veered 850 millibar winds might bring in some dry air. If we go back out to the west, Dodge City, we do see a little bit of dry air here aloft. But if we were talking about, we're in Oklahoma and we're looking out to the west at the drier air aloft, you can see at 850, 48 degree, 71 over 48 here, basically at the surface at 850 here at El Paso. Albuquerque should be kind of much of the same here. So would be concerned if we had an Oklahoma or Kansas threat today that veered low-level jet might bring in some drier air. But because our target area is up here in Iowa and we have ample moisture up here across western Nebraska toward Omaha, Topeka, not too worried about that at all being an issue. So model time here, let's go ahead and look at our 12Z NAM. So this is our 500 millibar chart. You can see this is our initialization here. Belt of slightly enhanced flow here across the northern portion of the country. A little bit of a shortwave here you can see in the flow. Big old trough here out across the west coast. Once again, not going to be an issue. Not going to be a player in today's setup. It's going to be this little shortwave here that we need to watch throughout the day. So let's go ahead a few hours. You can see that shortwave becomes a lot more well-defined here as we go into the afternoon. This is at 21Z, 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time here. And you can see a nice kink in the flow. Nice trough here, belt of enhanced flow impinging into Iowa, southern Minnesota, Wisconsin there. So this is going to be our player here. Out ahead of this, this should initiate storms. There was some talk that storms might initiate after dark here. I don't know if that's exactly going to be the case for today. I think this energy should be arriving about 4 p.m. or so, given the cold front and outflow boundary kind of intersection. As that outflow boundary retreats north, I would expect storm initiation to happen somewhere across maybe southwest to kind of west central Iowa by perhaps about 4 to 5 p.m. So I'm not seeing an issue as far as storms firing after dark here today. Move on a little bit to 0Z there. You can see that nice belt of flow centered squarely across Iowa there. Shortwave trough moving into the region. So this is very favorable for getting storms to fire. Down to 700 millibars, you can see that shortwave here. Just going to go over this quickly. You can see a little bit of a belt of enhanced flow here across southwest Iowa here at 21Z, little shortwave there. Again, that's going to help be the engine that will initiate storms this afternoon. 850 millibars here. You can see we do lose that 850 millibar kind of low-level jet that was across the southern plains, and you can see it's very, very veered here across the southern plains. That's not an issue all the time. If we have surface winds that are nicely backed out of the southeast and we don't have a kind of low-level drying issue as we talked about, then veered 850 winds are not going to be a super deal breaker as far as tornadic supercells go. We do get a little bit to build in here, perhaps just to the south of that outflow boundary here, early this evening, and that may help a little bit. We'll look at our surface pattern here. I'm going to zoom in to the Midwest sector here, and we'll take a look at our surface pattern. So here's our surface low out here, initialized there across the Kansas-Nebraska border this morning. You can see that low kind of moves off to the east, and we get a nice sharpening of that kind of stationary frontal zone here out across central Kansas all the way into southern Iowa. This has it a little bit farther south on the NAM. So that'll be something to watch as we go throughout the day today. This cold front pushes a little bit south and may kind of reinforce the western portion of the boundary, may not move a whole lot. So we'll have to watch where this ends up, because if these storms fire to the north of this boundary out in here, you can see the winds are out of the northeast. That's not going to be super favorable, a super favorable situation for tornadic activity here. Let's look at our moisture here. We'll take a couple of soundings. This is at 21Z. You can see where that moisture drops off, the 70s here, decreasing right in here. So the surface boundary is going to be somewhere right in here, at least on this NAM run. We'll take a look at some more models here in a second. But let's go ahead and pull some soundings. I want to pull some soundings from, let's go southern Iowa here, right along the boundary. And we'll go kind of a little bit farther out to the east, kind of that Missouri, Iowa, Illinois triple point here. So this is at 21Z, 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. You can see we have destabilized very, very nicely. Mixed layer CAPE approaching 3,000 joules per kilogram. We do have a little bit of an inversion here remaining, a little bit of a decrease in the lapse rates here between about 700 and 850 millibars. Interesting to note there. I'm not sure that that's going to be legitimate or will make a difference here. But nonetheless, steep lapse rates, strong instability aloft would favor a large hail threat. The Holographs are a little bit interesting here. You don't see a lot of turning in the low-level winds here. You do see some turning in the kind of 0 to 3 kilometer layer, so that would favor supercells there as well. If we look out a little bit farther east, kind of much of the same, not really a great-looking Holograph for tornadic supercells here. Deep layer shear is very strong, 40-plus knots here, so that shouldn't be an issue as far as supercell development goes here. But let's go ahead and move to 0Z. I want to take a look. We'll take one right out here, that kind of Keokuk, Iowa area, that Iowa, Missouri, Illinois triple point there. And we'll see what goes on. So by 0Z, our instability is increased to 4,000 joules per kilogram, 82 over 74 at the surface. Perhaps might be a little bit warmer. Of course, we know that the NAM has a little bit of a cold bias, but still very strong instability there. I suspect 74 might be a little bit high for the dew point. Of course, it's the summer in the Corn Belt, so that may have something to do with it. If we look at our surface data here, you can see we have a nice fetch of kind of upper 60s to low 70s dew points across Missouri into southern Iowa. It kind of tails off to mid 60s here. Low 60s with northeast extent there. So a nice fetch of good moisture here that should continue to be advected northward throughout the day. So I would think mid to upper 60s is going to be plausible for this area. So something like 82, 84 over 66, definitely in the realm of possibility here for our surface temperature dew point spread. Definitely well within the bounds for tornadoes. So that shouldn't be too much of an issue here. Interesting looking Holograph. Our low-level curvature and shear has increased from 21 to 00. Our bulk shear has increased to 53 knots from 40 here at 21Z. So the effect of that shortwave probably comes in between about 21 and 0Z, between about 4 and 7 p.m. So again, that should initiate storms probably about 4 to 5 p.m., I would think, across southern to south central Iowa there. Strong instability, of course, very favorable for large, perhaps significant hail. Steep lapse rates and that large instability, favorable for significant hail. Nice curvature here. 0 to 1 SRH of only 144. That's kind of marginal. I like to see about 150 there, but definitely adequate for tornadic supercell development. Effective inflow layer SRH about 350 meters squared per second squared. So very interesting looking for tornadic supercells there. Strong tornadoes. Of course, you do get an enhancement of that of the shear right along that outflow boundary. So this may be underestimated right along that boundary. So if we get storms to kind of ride that outflow boundary, then that may be where we're going to see that will be our window for strong tornadoes. It's going to be right along that boundary as storms are discrete. Another thing to notice here is the orientation of the Holograph with the storm motion here and storm relative winds. So you notice our storm is moving this way. It's going to be moving this way, kind of southeast. And we note we've done this before, that we can kind of tell where the precipitation is going to be vented and how the storm is going to look on radar based on the Holograph. And it looks like the precipitation is going to be vented out ahead of the mesocyclone region. So that may make storm spotting a little bit difficult here. And one thing to note also is that our storm relative winds here, especially in the mid-level portion of the storm, or of the atmosphere, are very, very weak. You can see our storm relative winds, as we know, we draw a vector from the storm motion to the Holograph here. And you can see here that these vectors, I'm not going to go into specifics on the math here, but they look very, very short compared to something at the surface, which is, we would say, maybe is, 10, 20, 30, 35 knots or so. These are much closer to about 20 knots, maybe even less here in the mid-levels. And when you have storm relative winds there, especially in the mid-levels, and a deep layer of storm relative winds that are very weak, generally less than 20 knots or so, you're going to see a tendency for storms to be high precipitation, or HP. So that may obscure any tornado that may come out of these supercells today, is the fact that these are going to be most likely high precipitation supercells. So you'll get beastly supercells, no doubt. Large hail, lots of heavy rain. They're in the core of these storms, but that may obscure the tornado, just given the orientation of the hodograph and the strength of the mid-level storm relative winds here. So that'll be something to note for anybody chasing today. You can see a lot of severe analogs here, a lot of tornadic and large hail analogs here. You can see that the effective STP is off the charts here, so definitely something to watch. I do think the tornado threat is going to be there for these storms, but we have to talk about storm mode as well. So we have this kind of cold front, this kind of frontal zone here that will initiate storms. Our outflow boundary kind of going to kind of merge with this western portion of the boundary here. So we have our nice short wave. That shouldn't be too much forcing aloft. But as far as shear vector orientation to the boundary, let's go look at our sounding again. Our shear vector, 262 at 26. So 262 degrees. So due west would be 270 degrees. So we're looking at something kind of right in here, something like that for our shears, our effective bulk shear vector. Well, here's our boundary. Here's our shear vector. What do you notice? They're pretty much exactly parallel. So that may force storms into more of a clustered, more linear mode right off the bat today. But again, if storms can stay discrete in this environment, there is the threat for significant severe hail and strong tornadoes with these storms. We'll take a look at some cams here. This is the 12Z. I'll go up to the 14Z NAM. That's probably going to be our most recent HER run, excuse me. So you can see we're clear throughout the day. By about 22, 23Z, we start to get storm initiation there in far southern Iowa. This is 0Z. And again, I always try to subtract about 2 hours from the HER. The HER seems to always be a little bit late. So it's kind of my general rule of thumb. So 23Z storm initiation there in southern Iowa. That would mean about 21Z or about 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So storms start to fire here. 1Z, you can see we have some semi-discrete supercells here across far southern Iowa. These would have, of course, that all-hazard severe threat. You can see they've kind of maintained that semi-discrete supercell mode here, surprisingly on the HER a little bit. So if this comes to fruition, we have semi-discrete supercells, then we would definitely see an enhanced tornado threat. Once again, we have to watch where these form with relation to the boundary. If these are just to the north of the boundary, you can see here on the HER that these are firing north of that boundary, north of that outflow boundary, where winds are more out of the northeast, and that is going to be an unfavorable situation for tornadoes, especially because we have the HER is progging a little bit of a surface inversion there. Storms may be a little bit elevated here. So this is an interesting development here. I didn't notice that as much on the NAM. Once we'll go back here, you can see to the north of the boundary here that temperatures are a little bit cooler, upper 70s here. Of course, NAM, as we know, has a cool bias, so that may be a little bit cool. But upper 70s here, and we'll just take a look at where the NAM has any precipitation here. We'll go to convective precip. So keep in mind where this boundary is, kind of Nebraska-Missouri border here. And we'll go to convective precip here. Let's go ahead, see if it fills in. So you can see the NAM has the storms firing up in here and then kind of forming along the boundary here by 3Z. It's going to be close. It's going to be close. If these are just to the north side of the boundary, they will be have a tendency to be a little bit more elevated here. The NAM not really showing that in this kind of sounding, but again, we took that from maybe just south of the boundary. The HER is progging these storms to be a little bit elevated, so that'll be something to watch for sure. And of course, we know as we go after sunset, stability starts to build in near the surface, and you get kind of a stable layer that these storms have a tough time drilling through, although the warm advection should continue to be in place there. Let me take another sounding here from the HER, and it's still showing elevated storms here. And 76 may be a little bit cool at the surface here, but we are at 2Z here. So, we'll have to watch that. Definitely the environment is favorable for supercells, tornadic supercells, but where they form with relation to the boundary is going to be interesting to note. We'll go to some other cams here, WRF ARW. Let's go through the day here. You can see by 23:00 we get storms to fire. And you can see they quickly kind of form into a little bit more of a messy mode, as we had talked about before. We kind of get a little bit of a clustered mode. Do have some kind of semi-discrete fragments in there, but by 1Z as they move into Illinois, nice kind of line there. This tail end one may be the most likely to produce any tornadic activity, and that continues as we go throughout the evening into the overnight hours as it moves through Illinois. Final cam here, NSSL WRF. We'll take a look here. So as we move on, 22:23Z, right about initiation time here, so 4, 5, 6 o'clock, anywhere in that period. And you can see that we get a lot of storms to fire along that boundary. Some semi-discrete elements here within the first couple hours here. So again, these would have a chance for producing tornadoes, perhaps some strong if they can track along the boundary. And then we kind of get a congealing sort of convective system here as it moves into Illinois. So all in all, a pretty interesting setup for today. I do think the threat is there for, definitely going to be for significant severe hail. We saw very high instability in some of the forecast soundings today, along with steep lapse rates aloft. So we should see some very large hail with these storms. Damaging winds are going to be a threat as well, especially later on as the storms move into Illinois. I wouldn't be surprised to see this wind forecast get bumped up to at least 30% here, especially for eastern portions of the outlook area into Illinois. As those storms congeal into more of a line, they will be more of a damaging wind maker. And I do think there is a tornado threat today, but again, we're going to have to watch where those storms form with regard to the boundary. If they are able to track along the boundary or very near the boundary, then they will tap into that kind of southeasterly flow right along the boundary, that very strong shear along the boundary in the low levels to produce tornadoes, perhaps some strong. But if they're to the north of the boundary, as the HRRR was predicting, then we may see storms remain a little bit elevated, producing mostly a large hail and damaging wind threat. So we're going to have to watch this today. The environment is definitely there for strong tornadoes across this corridor here. Even as far to the west as the area south of Des Moines, all the way into northwest Illinois. So definitely keep an eye on that if you're chasing out there or you live out there. For today, very potent setup on tap for today. Storms are going to be a guarantee. The potency of those storms was in question now. I do think large hail is going to be pretty much a given with these storms, as well as damaging winds, perhaps with eastern extent as they congeal into a line. The tornado threat is definitely there. Just going to need them to form in the proper spot in relation to the boundary to get a tornado threat with some strong tornado threat as well. So with that, that'll be it. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video.